thought he was going to enter the 2021 draft. That was not the case.
Yeah, I haven't looked into it. I mean, there's a couple guys that I know that didn't come out this year that I like. Brock Purdy, let's say.
I continued to follow him and rooted for him, was very happy when he became a San Francisco 49er. Whether you're a Trey guy or you're a Jimmy guy, those guys aren't playing. So we all have no choice but to just root for this kid. And how do you not root for Brock Purdy? Like, how do you not root for Brock Purdy? The kid is so fun to watch. He clearly is enjoying his time. His parents are in the stands. They're showing them after every big play. His dad, I mean, just as a dad watching that and how proud he is of his son, his adult son, it's just, I don't know, man. Like, if you can't root for Purdy in this situation,
no, and
you aren't overly excited after watching that performance, then I don't know what to tell you. Like, maybe being a football fan's not for you anymore. You know what I mean? I root for Brock Purdy hard, right? I liked Brock Purdy coming out of there. And just as a person, like, let's just throw the football stuff out of it. Brock Purdy and I have a lot of similarities when it comes down to our choice in the way that we like to live our life from a religious aspect, okay? And so I have a lot of admiration for Brock Purdy and his willingness to step outside the box, represent his Lord and Savior, which is, I agree with. That's my Lord and Savior too. So, like, just on a personal level, I really resonate with Brock Purdy. And that's unfortunate for him because, like we both said, he's already well outplayed his contract. I think the other thing the 49ers should do is showcase Brock Purdy. I think that's probably an area of opportunity that they had with both Jimmy and Trey Lance. When you think you have the franchise guy, you showcase him like the franchise guy. You don't showcase him like he's a part of the team and we don't care who the quarterback is, which is basically the way the team, Kyle Shanahan, and the players have talked for the last few years when Jimmy was here, who they liked, and when Trey's been here. That's the vibe they've given off. And not just the vibe, frankly, that's what they've said, is the quarterback doesn't matter. Just give us a live arm and we can go win, is what they've told you. And so I think when you have a guy that you believe is the franchise guy, you showcase him in that manner. You talk about him a little bit differently than you would a wide receiver on the team. You know, as good as Deebo Samuel is, he's not the quarterback. He's not as important as the franchise quarterback. And when you have a chance to do a brick by brick kind of showcase of a player, instead of doing Fred Warner for the 5th year in a row, maybe do Brock Purdy. When you have a chance to put somebody on the front of the game day flyer, instead of choosing Trent Williams, maybe choose Brock Purdy. And when you hang those banners outside the front of that stadium, Levi Stadium, maybe you should make sure that Brock Purdy is one of him, along with being a captain of the team. So when you have a guy that you believe is a franchise quarterback, treat him like a franchise quarterback.
And one of the things that I said is, if Brock Purdy truly is your guy, then go all in. And that is up to and including getting rid of Trey Lance one way or another, and just making sure that there isn't this split, so to speak, in the fan base. Because I get it that may not impact what happens in the locker room, but Kyle Shanahan's full of crap if he says this team doesn't pay attention to what's going on. Kyle Shanahan is the one that went to Trey Lance and told him that everybody was talking about how they were going to trade him to Tennessee. Kyle Shanahan pays attention. So remove the problem before it becomes a problem. I would treat Purdy the exact way that I wanted them to treat Trey, and I would move on from Trey if Purdy's the guy.
I try to preach patience as much as possible and saying, give all quarterbacks, all players really, but especially the quarterback position, give them 3 years. And not just 3 years in the league, but give them 3 years where they're playing 8 to 10 plus games for 3 seasons before you fully start to judge these guys. Because it is entirely possible that Brock Purdy, who played very well last year, to your point, rehabbed all offseason, is thrown into a crappy situation to start week 1. It looks ugly for 3 or 4 games. Then what is the narrative? Are we all of a sudden going to believe that Brock Purdy's not good? Was Jesse right the whole time? And man, he sucked and all these other things, the way that people think that we believe about Brock Purdy. Like, is that going to be the narrative? Or are we going to have patience and say, hold on, he had really good games his first year.
Yeah.
It started out a little rough. Let's see this thing through. Let's give it time. Let's give him through this year and into next year, and let's see where he's at before we rush to judgment. I think if we were to hang on every game, every throw, every play, the way that a lot of people would prefer that we did when we make these judgments on players, we would be wrong a lot. And so, to your point, let's just pump the brakes. We don't know. And I don't think we're going to know after this year either, good or bad from Brock Purdy. I'm not so sure we're going to know fully after this year either. Let's give it time. And I think it sucks because we want to know who the franchise quarterback is. Now, I would certainly feel better if Brock Purdy was the week 1 starter again the following season, that we saw at some point this trajectory where he's showing improvement. But it might be rough. And if it is, do we just write him off completely? Do we forget about the 8 games from last season? I don't know. I can see judgment being thrown his way, one way or another. There is reason to be excited about Brock Purdy and his athleticism that you're just not going to get from Jimmy G. And again, we would probably all agree that Jimmy G has reached his ceiling. We know what that looks like. And Brock Purdy has not. Now, much like Trey Lance, just because Brock Purdy has a ceiling, it also doesn't mean that he's going to reach his ceiling. We don't know. That's why I say be patient. Let's give it time and we'll see. I think there's a lot of pressure on Brock Purdy from the standpoint that people think he's the second coming of Joe Montana or whoever, and that if he plays, they should win a Super Bowl. And going into your second year off of an injury without having an offseason, I think that's a lot of pressure, man. That's a lot of pressure. I'm not saying he can't live up to it. I'm not saying if they don't win a Super Bowl, obviously hindsight's 2020. Maybe we look at it and say, they were decimated with injury or something crazy happened again.
Yeah.
But I think going into it, just looking at this roster, looking at the coaching staff, if you were to say the 49ers didn't win a Super Bowl, we're not going to tell you the reason why. Brock Purdy played all season. I think most of us would say, well, Brock Purdy probably didn't live up to expectation at that point. That would be the reason why. And I think that is an unfair expectation to put on his shoulders, in my opinion.
Nope, they're throwing. Touchdown. Debo, great back shoulder throw, Purdy. Let's go. That was a hell of a fucking throw right there.
All right. So don't you think that after the proof that I've shown that I was on to Brock Purdy well before most people even know who he was, that if I wanted to come across like the smartest guy in the room, that the path to doing so would have been extremely easy? Brock Purdy, the moment that he took over this team, played very, very good football. It would have been very easy for me to ride that wave and say, well, listen, I mean, here's the proof. I knew about Brock Purdy 16 months before he was drafted. I knew he was going to be this guy. And look at me, I'm the smartest guy. I didn't do that because that's not what I believed in the situation. I preferred Trey Lance, and I was very open about that. But in doing so, somehow that turned me into a Brock Purdy hater when it's clear that that's just not the case. I didn't hate on Brock Purdy. I just said, I don't believe he can be a franchise guy. And if I'm wrong about that, I will take the L. But we're not going to know for 3 years. I do, however, and I've said this, believe that with this team, he can be enough and they can win a Super Bowl. I never understood what the crime was in that. You know, Larry has done a phenomenal job. He was on to the Brock Purdy thing during the first training camp. Larry will tell you that he didn't like him coming out of college. He changed his mind very quickly. He rode the wave because that's what he believed, and he got a ton of credit for it, deservedly so. But I could have been the first guy on the scene. I could have been the one that ran with that wave way before anybody else. But it wouldn't have been honest. It wouldn't have been genuine to what I felt. The point is that I'm always going to give my real opinion and my real assessment. Doesn't mean I'm always going to be right. I'm certainly going to be wrong an awful lot. But it's not what people make it out to be. Just because I was unwilling to crown Brock as the guy forever does not mean that I hate Brock Purdy. In fact, I like Brock Purdy, and I believe that I've shown that throughout this video. That being said, I chose to drop this after a loss because if I had done it when he was playing well, people would be like, oh, you're backtracking and you're searching and you still hate him and you're a clown and you know how people are. But in doing it after a loss, it shows that I still support Brock Purdy. I'm going to continue to support Brock Purdy. I think Brock Purdy's played fantastic. He had a rough game. He's going to be fine. But let's give it time. If that's what people so choose they want to do. If some people want to give it time, give them that time without calling him a hater. If you want to crown him now, go ahead and do that. Nobody should be gatekeeping fandom, period.